We turn now to 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8. To sum up, or finally, let all be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil, or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose, that you might inherit a blessing. After having spoken to wives and husbands in the first 7 verses, Peter now speaks to everybody in general. He had spoken to servants being submissive to their masters in chapter 2, verse 18, submitting to those who are in authority in chapter 2, verses 13 to 17, given us the example of Christ in chapter 2, verses 21 to 25, spoken about how wives must submit to their husbands in chapter 3, verses 1 to 6, how husbands must honor their wives in chapter 3, verse 7. And then he says, finally, to sum up, a word to all of you. Let all be harmonious. In other words, you should all be of one mind, living like brothers with true love and sympathy for each other, compassionate and humble. Now, this is a word that we need to hear in our relationships with one another in the church. We are all weak human beings with many faults and failures in every one of us. Not one of us has become like Jesus yet. Not one of us is perfect. And therefore, we can easily bear, or we should be able to bear easily, with the faults of others. And therefore it should be easy to obey this exhortation in verse 8 and 9, because we ourselves are weak. Let everything be done with unity of mind. Be sympathetic. Make allowance for the weakness of the other person. If you're a husband, for your wife, but not just for your wife, but also for a weaker brother. The same principle applies. We who are strong, Romans 15:1, ought to bear with the infirmities of those who are weak. Be brotherly. Be like one happy family, loving one another with tender hearts. What we have inherited from Adam in our hearts is a hardness. Our hearts are like stone. But we need to be kind-hearted. God has promised to take away that heart of stone and give us a soft heart under the new covenant towards one another. If you find your heart is hard towards somebody, even towards someone who has harmed you or cheated you or wronged you, you can be sure that you haven't got the new covenant promise fulfilled in your heart. Because the new covenant promise in Ezekiel 36 is that God will give you a soft heart. So be kind-hearted. Ask God to give you this soft heart so that you can be compassionate and tender-hearted towards the other person and humble in your spirit. Don't assert yourself and think that you're right. You may be wrong. Be humble in your spirit towards one another. And never return evil for evil. Again, the example of Christ in chapter 2, verse 23. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. And when you're insulted, don't insult back. Then you do not follow in the footsteps of Christ. But give a blessing instead. In other words, don't just be neutral, but do some positive good. When somebody curses you, go ahead and bless him. Say something good. And then it says, God will bless you for it. For you were called for this purpose, that you might inherit a blessing. You see, God has called us that He might bless us. But in order to bless us, we need to treat other people the way God treats us. You remember the story that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, in the last half of that chapter, of the unmerciful servant who was forgiven about 40 million rupees by his master, and he could not forgive a fellow servant a small sum of 40 rupees, even though his master had forgiven him 1,000,000 times that amount. The point of that parable is that what God has forgiven us is 1,000,000 times more than what we are asked ever to forgive another. Remember that when you think of somebody who's done some great harm to you. According to that parable, the harm that you have done to God is 1,000,000 times greater. You've asked God to forgive you, and He's forgiven you freely. Forgive that person also, freely. Freely, with all of your heart. Then God can bless you. Blessed are the merciful, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, for they shall receive mercy. Now that word is meaningless if we are going to receive mercy, even if we are unmerciful ourselves. No, it's specific. The only ones who will receive mercy are the ones who are merciful to others. The way we treat others is going to be the way God treats us. Are you going to be hard on others? God will be hard on you. Are you going to judge others? God will judge you. There are many verses, Matthew 7 and other places where Jesus said that the way you measure out judgment to others in the same way God will measure out judgment to you. The way you give freely to others, God will give to you too. And so, this is a principle that we need to bear in mind. That when you give a blessing to others, 1 Peter 3:9, to those who insult you, you yourself will inherit a blessing. Because this is a principle in Scripture. Give and it shall be given to you, pressed down, running over. It'll come from God into your bosom. But if we don't give, then we don't receive from God either. If we are selfish, God will withhold from us as well. And so if we have not received from God, we need to ask ourselves whether the reason may be that we have not given to others. This must be the reason. For God will always be faithful to His word. If we give, we receive in exact proportion to what we give. And what we give is what we are going to receive. And so he says here in verses 10, 11, and 12, quoting from Psalm 34, verses 12 to 16, he says, if you love life and want to see good days, and who of us does not want to see good days? All of us want to see good days? Then keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. So important to guard our tongue from ever speaking one bad word, and that includes anything that we write down in a letter too. Guard what you write in letters to other people. That is the equivalent of speaking with the tongue. From ever saying anything evil, from ever insulting people or speaking rudely or badly to others. And keep your lips from ever telling lies. So much is dependent upon the tongue. So much is dependent upon the tongue. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Here is a prescription that God has given in the Old Testament and Psalm 34, repeated in the New Testament in 1 Peter 3, 10 to 12. First of all, watch your tongue, what you say and what you write, that you never, ever say anything evil or rude or insulting to others. Keep your lips from ever telling lies. When you're on a tight spot, speak the truth, even if it means financial loss or any other loss. Turn away from all that you know to be evil and do good. Turning away, it's an action of the will. I don't want that which is evil. I want to do good. Do good to those who do evil to you. Seek peace with all of your heart. Pursue it, it says. And the Living Bible paraphrases it like this, that if you want this happy good life, try to live in peace, even if you must run after it to catch and hold it. In other words, if you have to make an effort to live at peace, go ahead, go and visit that person, go and humble yourself and ask forgiveness. Seek for peace at any cost, of course, without compromising truth, but pursue peace. And if you do this, you'll find the eyes of the Lord are upon you, and the ears of the Lord are open to your prayer. Verse 12. The eyes and the ears of the Lord are specially upon and open to those who fulfill these conditions in verses 10 and 11. But those who do not fulfill these conditions, they are called evil. And it says here in verse 12, the face of the Lord will be against them. So if we want God's eyes to be upon us, and His ears to be open to our prayers so that He always listens to us, watch your tongue, don't speak evil, don't tell lies, turn away from evil and do good, and seek to live in peace with all men.